rubber band, there's going to be more tension in it, so it's going to be able to fire a little bit farther and a little harder. Theoretically, the more rapid the eccentric contraction, the more likely the reflex is activated. For an activity to be truly plyometric, there must be a movement preceded by an eccentric muscle contraction. Like I was saying before, it has to be the eccentric and then the concentric. Plyometric training can promote changes within neuromuscular systems that allow the person to have better control of contracting muscles. The three phases of the stretch shortening cycle are the eccentric phase, the amortization phase, and the concentric phase. The stretch cycle prepares the contractile elements for a shortening cycle, which is the concentric. Stimulates and activates the stretch reflex, like Grant was talking about earlier. And muscle spindles lying parallel with muscle fibers sense the length of the muscle and the velocity of the stretch and transmit this info to the CNS. And you have receptors, GTOs. Basically, they're called Golgi tendon organs, and they send signals to the CNS about the amount of tension that's in the muscle. Impulses are sent back from the CNS to the muscle to facilitate reflexive shortening contractions of the stretch muscle. The stretch reflex is the most basic sensory response system. It goes directly from the afferent sensory nerves to the spinal cord to make contact with the efferent motor neurons to permit rapid response by muscles. It's also referred to as the monosynaptic response. It's the fastest reflex in the body. The contractile elements are your myofibrils, your sarcomeres. The muscle is the only structure in the body that actively shortens and lengthens. Your non-contractile elements are your tendons, your connective tissue surrounding the muscle fibers. And you have your series elastic component, which are your tendons, your sheath, and the sarcolemma, and your parallel elastic components, which are your muscles and connective tissue. Now, when the muscle is actively shortened, the component responsible is the contractile elements. And when the muscle actively lengthens, the components responsible for producing force are the contractile elements, the series elastic, and the parallel elastic. The series elastic and the parallel elastic offer resistance to a movement as the muscle is elongated. And the contractile elements control the speed and the quality of the movement. The GTOs, as I said earlier, they play an inhibitory role in muscle activity. As the muscle shortens, GTOs are stimulated to send impulses to the spinal cord that relay facilitation to limit the muscle force production. So they limit the production that you have. But it's believed that when you're training, doing plyometrics, that your GTOs, excitatory levels, is increased so that more stimulation is necessary to facilitate response from the GTO, allowing for an increased tolerance for additional stretch. So the more you stretch, the more force that muscle should be able to produce. As the stress loads are better tolerated, there may be an ability to create stronger strength reflex that results in increased power during the concentric phase. If the amortization phase is prolonged, it inhibits the stretch reflex, and the heat generated is dissipated and wasted. I was saying that earlier. Plyometric force production. Think of the rubber band. The greater the stretch, the greater the quantity of stored potential and elastic energy there is. Stored elastic energy is converted to kinetic energy. The plyometrics work because the transfer of elastic energy that is produced during the eccentric activity goes to the power of the concentric activity. The load produced with the lengthening is stored in non-contractile elements, which is basically like your sheaths and your tendons. Remember, force production is different from concentric and eccentric activity. Concentric, all active components must produce force, and eccentric, part active produce force and part passive produce force. And the muscle works less to produce the same force in the eccentric part. Plyometric effectiveness. The important factors in increased strength and power output. The development of neuromuscular responses to stresses applied. The GTO threshold are raised, like I said, to permit more stretch. You can get a stronger reflex. Increased neuromuscular coordination. As the speed increase and activities performed more accurately, the strength to perform is improved. Energy movement are not wasted on ineffective activity. Better coordination permits greater power in production. When speed and coordination of activity is improved, greater power can be produced. Kind of like with the sprinting mechanics that Grant was talking about, excuse me. The rate of stretch is more important than the amount of stretch. So how fast you can do it is more important than how much you can do. Alright, so in case you're trying to put this into your program, it's kind of a few things that you want to consider before you do it. It's only appropriate in later stages of rehab, and some people will use plyos in rehab, but you can't do it when somebody's like fresh out of surgery because, of course, that goes against logic. But you must have a good base of muscle strength, endurance, and flexibility, so you have to consider that as well. The specificity of training. Break down and analyze the basic movement or patterns of the sport. So basically, you want it to be sport specific. You don't want to do something that's not. I'm training football and I'm doing plyos that aren't specific to football. Include open and closed kinetic chain exercises. For the lower extremity, biomechanics should be sound to ensure a stable base of support and normal force transmission. Biomechanical abnormalities are not contraindications for plyometrics, but can contribute to stress failure, overuse, and injury. Perform functional tests to screen for adequate strength base before beginning plyometrics. Power squat, perform 5 squats. These are just suggestions. You can alter this as you feel, but power squat, perform 5 squats at 60% body weight in 5 seconds. There's another thing you can do: stability testing. Static stability. These are just a few different types of tests that you can use to check somebody's stability. Dynamic movement testing. You can do the vertical jump or single leg jumping for distance. And you want to test flexibility as well. Alright, when you design your program, you want to consider the age, body weight, competitive level, surface footwear, proper technique, progression, and goals when developing the program. We deal with different types of athletes that are all different levels. Yeah, they all play for Tennessee, but they're all not at the same level. We get walk-ons who probably couldn't make it on a high school team right about now just because of the level of conditioning. If we threw some of them into an advanced plyo workout, they wouldn't be able to survive, so we need to consider that as well. Direction of body movement. Horizontal body movement is less stressful than vertical movement. This is when you got bigger athletes, it'll be easier for them to, less stressful on their joints and stuff to do stuff that's horizontal rather than vertical. Depending on the weight of the athlete and the technical proficiency demonstrated during the jumps. Weight of the athlete. The heavier athlete, the greater the training demands placed on the athlete. Speed of execution of exercise. Increased speed of execution on exercises. Single leg hops, alternate leg bounding raises the training demand on the individual. So these are some other things that you got to consider when you're designing it. Whether you're designing for one person or a team, you're going to have to alter those. Some guys might be able to do single legs. Other guys won't be able to do that. External load. Adding an external load can significantly increase the training demand. Do not raise the load to a level that will significantly slow the speed of the movement. You can use vests, to perform some of these exercises. Intensity. We all know intensity is the amount of effort exerted. This can be controlled by the type of exercise performed. Double leg jumping is less stressful than single leg jumping. Progress from simple to complex. Adding external weight or raising box height can increase the intensity. Also, volume, the amount of work performed in one session. The total number of foot contacts in one session. For beginners, you want to do about 75 to 100. Advanced guys, 200 to 250. So for the most part, at this level, you guys should be able to do 200 to 250 contacts per session. Frequency, optimal frequency is suggested that you do it about 48 hours of rest in between so guys can get a full recovery. Training age, you train younger ages. Overall training demand should be kept low. Youth sports involve plyometric movements. Research has shown that plyometric training in youth does result in strength gains and increased bone mineral content in females. Like I was saying earlier, I just could think back on all the stuff that I used to do as a kid and just see how it kind of made me into the athlete that I was. And a lot of that stuff was plyometric type stuff, because we spent a lot of times we jumped off of heaters, like we jumped from heater to see who can get the farthest. And you see how that stuff kind of develops. So some people think you shouldn't be doing plyometrics, but you see them outside and they're jumping off the top of the jungle gym. So I mean, I in my opinion, I believe that they can. Recovery, rest time between exercise sets. Longer recovery period should be used to allow restoration of metabolic stores, because plyometrics is an anaerobic in nature. Power training, your work to rest ratio should be 1:3 or 1:4. And for endurance training, 1:1 or 1:2. Precautions and contraindications. Precautions, you want to consider how long, both recovery time and how long your session is going. And delayed onset muscle soreness, you have to take all this into effect. Contraindications, acute inflammatory conditions, post-operative conditions, in case somebody's using this for rehab, they just fresh off of surgery. And instability, you might have a guy you might be doing the exercise that's very unstable for a bigger guy, but for a little guy, he can do it. But you're gonna always have contraindications. Like I was watching it was a lady, Coach Barnes showed, she was snatching like heavy weight, and she snatched it, arm broke, weight hit her head. To me, that's a contraindication. I'll never snatch heavy weight after watching that video. But that's not no reason for you to stop doing it. So you're gonna always have contraindications. You just have to choose which ones, whether the risk is worth it. Classification of individuals: beginners, intermediate, advanced. Now you can get into develop and initiate a program. These are just some of the categories. You have in-place jumping, you have standing jumps, multiple response jump hops, kind of like the little mats. They have the little squares, those little circles on them. In-depth jumping and box drills, bounding, high-stress, sport-specific drills. Equipment, you can use a different variety of equipment. This is just to give you a few. You have cones, boxes, hurdles, med balls, and tubing. Performing plyometrics for lower extremities, the feet should be nearly flat and all landing. Individuals should be encouraged to touch and go. That's the whole point of it. Reverse the landing as quick as possible and spend minimal time on the ground. Success of a program depends on how well the training variables are controlled, modified, and manipulated. In general, as intensity of the exercise increase, volume should decrease, and vice versa. It should follow a periodization period of 4 phases year-round: the competitive season, your post-season training, preparation, and your transitional phase. Plyometrics should be performed in latter stages, preparation phase, and during transitional phase for optimal results. To gain optimal benefits of a plyometric program, the individual should be conditioned with sufficient strength and endurance, exhibit some type of athletic ability, exhibit coordination and proprioceptive abilities, free of pain and from any injury or condition. Pain is a big one. That's kind of a sign, okay, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Plyometrics are not designed to be an exclusive training program, so it's something that you supplement in with your speed training, with your strength training. These are just a few drills that you can do for upper body. I know we all think plyometrics, first thing that comes to our mind is legs, jumping, bounding, but they also is upper body stuff. And here is just a few more to let you guys look. I'm not going to read them all for time's sake, but you can just look through those real quick. And here's some more for lower body. The ones we're probably more familiar with: double leg squatting, leg pressing. Guidelines for a plyometric program: sound technical foundation. It should be specific to the goals of the athlete. The quality of the work is more important than the quantity of the work. The greater exercise intensity level, the greater the recovery time should be. A plyometric training can have its greatest benefits at the conclusion of a normal workout. Best replicates exercise under partial or total fatigue environment. The proper technique can no longer be demonstrated. Max volume has been achieved, and the exercise must be stopped. So that's something for you to just pay attention to when you're watching you guys go through the workout. Activity should be progressive in nature. You know, build up. You can start off with ankle hops, going on to box house, and then seeing double-leg tucks or single-leg tucks or something of that nature. Volume intensity can be modified by increasing the number of exercises, the number of reps, and decreasing the rest between sets. Sessions should be conducted no more than 3 times weekly in the preseason phase of training. Volume should prevail. During competitive season, frequency should be reduced to twice weekly, with intensity more importantly. Test dynamically to provide progression and motivational feedback. The key element in execution of proper technique is the eccentric or landing phase. This is, in case you're thinking using it for rehab. Clinical plyos can be categorized according to the loads applied to the healing tissue. You have medial, lateral loading, rotational loading, shock absorption, deceleration loading. Plyometrics can be further categorized into in-place activities, dynamic distance drills, depth jumping, which are simple jumping drills, bilateral or hopping drills, unilateral. Medial-lateral loading, basically cutting activity. It should be implemented following injury to medial or lateral complexes. Progress from bilateral to unilateral activities. Slide board. You guys seen some of the athletic trainers will use those boards, but they have to wear those little things over their shoes. They do slide boards, lateral bounding, and crossovers. Rotational loading places stress on the cruciate ligaments, the menisci and the capsule. Spin jumps and lateral hopping. For shock absorption, this is the last one. Places stresses on the muscles, tendons, and articular cartilage. Final preparation for return to sports. Repetitive jumping, 5-dot drills, jump down. So basically, you can use plyos for a variety of different things. Whether it's trying to build somebody up to gain some type of athleticism, or coming fresh off an injury. Well, not fresh off an injury, but after they begin their rehab, you can add it to get them back prepared to get into the sport. Any questions?
Any questions?